Hey everybody, Steve here in the New York store. If you've looked at the website recently, you see we've got some items that belong to the great Earl Palmer. For those of you who don't know, you should check them out. Check the website out and click the link that takes you over to talk a little bit about Earl's history and his recordings. This guy was truly one of the hit makers of all time. He was on more recordings than is possibly imaginable. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 450 dates in 1967 alone. Earl was a very, very prolific player. He was on a lot of recordings, a lot of album work for TV, TV shows, not only albums, but TV shows, soundtracks for movies. The list just goes on forever. Very, very prolific during the later 50s into the 60s through the 70s, and even after that on his own, but less so than during that key period. After Earl passed away, we've been working with his widow on some of the items that are left that are Earl's that we're going to sell for her. And one of those items is the drum that's here. And this is a very, very cool drum. This drum is from the 60s, and first glance, it looks as if it's a Ludwig 3x13, which they made all during that era. However, it is not. It's a very cool special drum. And it was probably on a number of recordings, and I can't go back and tell you because there's no information about what was used on what records. But this is from that era, and there's very cool things about it. First of all, the drum is made with Ludwig lugs, the same that they put on their little 3x13 snares and on their 4x14 downbeats. That sideways lug to fit better on the shell. The strainer that's on here is what we like to refer to as kind of a beer tap strainer, and it's basically a Camco strainer from the 60s. Same, very simple throw off. I like it. Goes off, goes on. Simple. On the flip side, the butt end is a simple single node butt. Attaches here. It's got a WFO washer, but it's basically the same thing that was on the Camco drums of that era. Standard triple flanged rims, nothing special there. But what's exceptionally cool about this is if you look at the shell. If you look at this shell, you expect to flip this over and see a wood shell. That's not what's here. This is a fiberglass shell, and I can tell by the way it's constructed that this is not a 5 shell. This is a Blaemire shell. And think back a little bit here. We're talking about the 60s. And Earl was a member of the infamous Wrecking Crew in Hollywood. The Wrecking Crew was a group of studio musicians made up of countlessly fabulous people. Chuck Finley on trumpet, Carol Kay on bass, everybody and his brother, who was a fabulous guitar player at that period of time. Session guys, Glenn Campbell, many, many guys. Hal Blaine was the contractor for that group and the drummer. And Hal, as you probably know, is on countless recordings through that era as well. What you may not know is that Earl was also a member of the Wrecking Crew. And when you think about this shell, made by Blaemire, it's exactly the same type of shell that was used to make the concert toms that Hal Blaine had. Hal Blaine had the first set of concert toms ever made before Ludwig invented them. They were made with Ludwig hardware on Blaemire shells, and Hal used those for recording countless albums through that period of the 60s. Well, if Earl was in the Wrecking Crew with Hal, looks to me like Earl went and had the Blaemire folks make him a shell for this little 3x13 snare drum. It's actually probably a shade under 3 inches, but we'll call it 3. It's probably about 2.75. So, this drum is for sale, and the drum, remarkable drum. It's got a diplomat batter head on it. The tuning is exactly the way it came out of the box when I got it from Earl's widow. Very, very sensitive drum. It's crazy. Out at the edge. In the center, rim shot is huge on it. Cross stick, fat. You'd think it was a much, much deeper drum. So I can see this thing probably used on a number of recordings. Again, I wish I could tell you, but there's no information about that. But I can see this in the studio. It'd be a great drum to record with. You could damp it up a little bit with some tape, like you'd normally do in the studio. It's a fabulous, fabulous drum. So, it's available on the website. You can see it at www.maxwelldrums.com. Look for the Earl Palmer collection. Click on there. Piece of rock and roll history and a drum that belonged to truly one of the hit makers of all time, Earl Palmer. Thanks, gang.